This is Continuum Drag, a weekly podcast where we watch sci-fi, fantasy, and everything in between.
This week, The World Beyond.
All right, mister. What's this golem you've been talking about?
It's a body without a soul.
Made out of mud?
Pretty much. Mud and sticks. Formed in the shape of a man and brought to life through the incantations of special magical formulas.
You're not serious, are you?
In Hebrew folklore, in the Middle Ages, mystics, rabbis who used the Kabbalah, which your brother had here on the desk, were thought to be able to create these creatures.
And you believe that?
Welcome to Continuum Drag, the podcast with a connection to the dead. I'm Luke, here with my co-host Jordan. What's real, Jordan?
I'll tell you what's real. Mud pies don't go around killing dogs and people.
Well, that's true. They don't, those mud pies.
Unless they're a golem.
Yes, it's TV movie week this week, and we're watching the 1978 CBS pilot for The World Beyond. Jordan, did you notice this was actually the second pilot for this series?
I saw that, yeah. So there was a pilot that came out, I think it was, this came out in April, and I think the original one came out in January. This came out in January, and the original came out in April, called World of Darkness. So they had two kicks at the can. CBS thought, we really want you to see if this can be a series. And they tried it twice, and people said, no, we don't want it to be a series.
What's interesting, too, because it's not even like a retool. It's like a direct sequel.
You know what it's like is in multiple ways. It's a little bit like the pilots for Kolchak.
That's a good point. I mean, those were actual full TV movies, but yeah, they were just like, let's just see if this paranormal investigator has some legs.
And we've said this before, but man, did they love paranormal investigators in the 1970s, huh?
They really did. Due to our own poor research on this podcast, I had no idea that there was a prequel, though I looked into it to see if I could track it down to see if I could add it to our list to go back to at some point, but I can't find a copy of World of Darkness anywhere, so I think we just watched the only existing version of this TV show.
You know what, though? And we'll go through it, obviously, but the opening of this really gives you all you need, because we're going to find out very quickly when we get into this that he's a sports reporter, I think it is, who had some accident.
Yeah, he was baffled, Jordan. He was baffled.
Yeah. Just like Leonard Nimoy was a race car driver, this guy's a sports writer, and he has an accident. He's dead for, I think it's 2.5 minutes, something to that effect, and now ghosts can sort of speak to him and compel him to solve cases. And you're like, all right, I'm in. That's a pretty good setup. And that's really all you need to know. And they get that out of the way like in a minute. And it wasn't like I was like, I need more of this origin story. I was like, I get it.
Yeah, they didn't need a whole premise pilot where they explain it. No. It was like, I see ghosts that tell me to do stuff. Let's go on an adventure.
Yeah, like this did feel like it was episode 3 or 4 of a show, but I was fine with it.
Yeah, I mean, there was no great loss. So a little background information on Jordan. It was written and created by Art Wallace, who developed the cult vampire show Dark Shadows with the creator Dan Curtis. And I was just like, what is that? I was like, what does that mean? Like, how did he develop it? So I dug a little deeper into the Wikipedia, and it said that Dan Curtis had a dream, and then Art Wallace was hired to create a story out of that dream.
Oh, wow.
And that was
that's one way to make
Shadows.
A show. and it ran for 5-6 years, and they made like thousands of episodes, right?
Yeah. It was a truly epic series, I'm told. But it also stars Jo Beth Williams of Poltergeist fame, this particular pilot.
And I forgot to look it up. I saw one thing that said this was her first credit. I don't think it is. Maybe it's her first major credit, but I recognized her right away.
It's funny. I only watched Poltergeist a couple months ago for the first time.
Yeah, how'd you like it?
That was really good. I didn't realize quite what it was. I mean, I knew what it was in theory, but when I watched it, I'm just like, oh, this is just like a lost Spielberg film from his that era where he's most best known for. It's
Craig G. Nelson, and he's like, you didn't move the bodies, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that was fun to see. I was like, I know this lady. And of course, Jordan, it was filmed in Canada.
That's right. Yeah, I saw it was filmed in Gananoque, right?
Yeah, it's just down the street from you.
Yeah, it's not far. And it's funny because it plays for the East Coast. I think it's Maine it's supposed to be. and there's a reason why they need it, because they need to be on the ocean. But it's so clearly just like cottage country.
Are you going to go do the Beyond World Beyond tour this weekend?
I should go do it.
I'm sure they take you out on a bus, show you all the sights.
And like, there's where a mud monster was.
You can see the dock where they met the man with the boat called Lover.
That's right. Where did the dog bite the guy? Right over there.
Well, it was broadcast on January 21st, 1978. And Jordan, there were two other continuing reg series that were on the air at the same time. This was being broadcast. Can you figure them out?
Was Quark on at that time?
It was Quark.
Yeah. And there's two shows that were on.
Yeah, that should tell you what the second one was.
Oh, the second one. You should tell me?
Yeah.
Was it Kolchak?
Nope, it was Quark and Come Home, Mrs. Noah.
Oh, Come Home, Mrs. Noah. Oh, right, that's right. Yeah,
they walk hand in hand together at all times.
What a time to be alive, huh?
It is very funny to me that those two sci-fi comedies were just running simultaneously, just on different sides of the ocean.
Well, it is funny that just whatever is in the cultures at the time, and like we sort of mentioned earlier, this has shades of some other things we've seen. Like, obviously, it's got a very similar kind of premise to Baffled, which is something we watched years ago. It's a little bit like Spectre, and a little bit, and of course, like as we mentioned, Kolchak. It has, I think, elements of that. Now, the lead of this is nothing like Kolchak, but I think the basic premise of the show would have been similar.
Yeah, it certainly feels like it's of a time where people were trying to crack the code around this particular type of show.
Yeah, they're like, guys, we want it to be a little bit scary. We want it to be kind of a monster of the week, and we want the lead to have had some sort of horrific injury that gives him special powers.
Yeah, he needs a brain injury, that's for sure.
Yeah, you either end up talking to the dead or you end up having superpowers.
Well, here's the IMDb summary for The World Beyond. A golem made of mud terrorizes a couple on a remote Maine island.
I mean, you know what? I'll say that. That's about as succinct as this movie is. Because if this movie is nothing if not kind of quick. They don't waste a lot of time with stuff.
No. This is a very pithy movie. Let's get to it. Let's get moving.
Exactly.
And yes, as you said, the pilot starts with an explainer around our hero, Paul Taylor, and his connection to the supernatural. He's a sports writer. He was born in Minnesota, but he's living in New York City, and he's working on a book about skydiving right now.
That's right.
We see him after a horrific motorcycle accident where, as you said, he dies canonically or clinically he dies canonically. I guess both those things. He dies for 2 minutes and 37 seconds, in which we see him floating in a black void full of mist, shirtless, wearing a pair of jeans.
No, I didn't look this up, but how long can you be, excuse the term, how long can you be brain dead for? How long can you be...
I'm no doctor.
I'm assuming it's 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Like, he just was under.
He snuck in under the line. You know what? I don't really know, actually. I'm not sure what the legality, the metagality of it is.
The number was so specific, it led me to believe that they wanted to, like, it was the one thing they did research on to make sure that, he wasn't coming out and he was like, having trouble with math after,
Well, you have to know the first pilot, World of Darkness, probably was 90% the hospital and then 10% a mystery.
That's right. Yeah, you're probably right.
Anyway, this has left him with a connection to the dead because he's seen the other side, and the dead now appear to him and sort of give him little missions, and they're like, you must go protect this person. It seems like it's always protection jobs, basically.
Yeah, and now let me ask you this, because we're going to see how this sort of works, and what we see is we're going to see a guy who's got like a mustache, and he's sort of going to, it's like a spectral image. He's going to kind of get projected up, and he's going to go like, help this person, you have to go. And again, as you said, he's compelled. I thought it was going to be a little bit more like the ghosts were going to help him along the way. Do you know what I mean? Like they were going to be like, psst, over there. But maybe that's leading too much into the comedy unintentionally,
Well, I'll say this. The ghosts are pretty functional in this. Like, with the ghosts we see, it just appears on a black background, like, when he dies. They don't have any good idea for, like, what the ghosts look like. They just look like an average middle-aged man just standing with no makeup effects on. So there's really no reason to, like, use the ghosts because they're not that exciting to look at. They're just, like, a guy.
But it is interesting you said functional because that is really what it is. They just function to propel the plot forward. They're not going to be really involved at all, and I don't know if that was similar for the first pilot, and they were retooling it, or that's just what they want the show to be. It's sort of like they send you off, and then it's all what's his name, Paul Taylor. Yeah, sorry.
Clearly not where they want to spend their special effects budget, so they don't dwell on it. This ghost tells him to head to Logan's Island to protect a Marion Faber. So very quickly we cut. He's arrived in Maine. He's finding a local boatman at the docks to take him over to Faber's Island. Or Logan's Island. It's all moves along very quickly, and I love this old man who runs this boat. He's just like, yeah, I'll take you over there, but it's one way, and it's going to cost you $15.24.
Yeah, it was a kind of weird scene because a funny scene I should say, where he's just like, why is it in 24 cents? And the guy's like, why not?
Like, I can do it.
He's like, good point, I guess. And I'm like, well, they're both right. They both make perfect sense. But this guy's name, Andy Borchardt.
He's the only boat in town, Jordan. You're going to pay what he tells you to pay.
Yeah, it's right. So he's basically like, I need to go over this island and to see. He's like, I got to go over and see. They're like, oh, there's like to see the Fabers, and just then, Marion Faber, who's the brother of the guy who's like compelled her, she shows up just coincidentally to also take the same boat. Although I didn't see her paying, I noticed.
Well, she'd been there earlier. She'd already made arrangements to go over. He's got two passengers. He says we got to wait for the second one, and it just conveniently is Marion Faber.
Yeah, and that's Jo Beth Williams, and I don't know if I think right off the bat that it's the sister, right?
Yeah, absolutely, because he knows that's who he's come to take care of. And like the whole thing is the reason it costs so much, the reason so few people head over. There's only one boat that does it. Is there's only 2 homes on the island. None of them have any power, and it's not really a place people go to that frequently.
And I should say it's interesting because clearly he's only compelled by people who have passed away because they're ghosts. So when he first meets her, she's like, I'm going over to see my brother. And he doesn't even give one of those lead up pull his collar like, ooh. He's just like, yeah, me too. And she's like, do you get a letter? He's like, yep. And it's weird because he kind of does a little bit of dance, but he also doesn't. It's just like he doesn't bother to explain. He's like, don't worry, this will work itself out later.
Well, he kind of does because Marion says, I got this letter from my estranged brother to come visit him. And when she's just like, are you going to see my brother because he sent you a letter too? Paul's answer is, what does he look like?
That's right. She's like, and she's like 30 years old, mustache thing. And the first thing I thought was, that guy's 30 years old? Because it's a movie from the 70s and every single person looks 55 years old.
It is great. I love watching things from this period when they're just like, I'm 35. And I'm like, well, you look 20 to 30 years older than that. But that's sort of what happens. He's just like, what's she look like? She describes her brother to him. And then Paul's just like, yeah, that's the guy who sent me the message. He has no further questions.
It is funny. I don't think this is it's not that this is badly written. It's not it's not Shakespeare here, but they do just wave away a lot of stuff that they don't want to spend time on, and I do have some respect for that. They don't like they weren't sitting in a writer's room going, how do we have this make sense? How do we have this awkward thing? They're just like, she has no follow-up questions. Done. Move on. Let's get to the island. And I'm like, great. Good.
Yes, they pull into the boathouse on the island for the Faber place. And as they pull in, they see the brothers' speedboat has sunk to the bottom of the boathouse. So he clearly had no way to get off the island. And when the boatman tries to get off the boat, and he's got a dog with him. This whole time the boatman's brought his dog with him. Very cute little dog, big pointy ears. You can't help but like this dog. But he tries to get the dog to leave the boat. The dog's obviously quite freaked out. There's something wrong with this island. And the dog just tears into this man's arm, just tears it to shreds.
Yeah, it's you don't really see the violence, but the end result is way more violent than you would think. It's like the guy's arm's like pouring with blood. And then he's just like, he keeps going. He's like, it's the nicest dog. Why would it do that?
It is very funny. A fairly bloodless movie, except for that one cutaway to just like a really mangled arm.
So you get the sense that something's not right. Obviously, if you haven't got the sense with a ghost already, you get the sense that something is not right on this island. And I have to say, this movie does do a pretty good job of setting the atmosphere. This is clearly a low-budget movie. They're doing a lot of like dimming the light here to make it look like it's night when they're shooting in day. And there's it's a very small cast in a very contained area. I think they do a pretty good well of ratcheting the tension. And any of the reviews that I've seen of people who watched this movie, apparently any child who watched this movie in 1977 was terrified for life. Every single comment is just like, this was the scariest movie I've ever seen. This is the scariest movie I've ever seen. So it had to at least have been very effective at the time.
Yeah, a real cabin in the woods style thing, because they take the boatman
Yes.
up to the Faber house to bandage his wounds and, of course, get him a whiskey for his parched gullet.
That's right. He does say gullet, and people don't say that enough. They don't say gullet.
It's true. You should be walking around being like, I need a tea for this gullet right here.
I'll do it tomorrow.
And as they get to the house, they notice something's a little odd at the old Faber place. The doors are covered in mud, the windows have been boarded up, and the brother sure had a lot of books about spells and incantations laying around.
That's the sign right now, right away, where you know what kind of movie this is going to be, because everything on his bookshelf is sort of like, for lack of a better term, it's sort of about spells and witchcraft and like you said, incantations. So you're just like, oh, he was doing something sketchy.
But then the key element that I think has caused all these nightmares, and I think is probably the most effective part of the show, kicks in, and it is a strange howling noise that sort of fills the air that will basically fill the soundtrack for much of the rest of the movie. It's a very, very effective, very creepy, unnerving, like just howling that just sort of fills the soundscape of this movie. And I was like, oh, this is kind of scary, and only just because of the howling.
You're right, because and this is hopefully not spoiling things, but you see very little in this, and they kind of save what we're going to find out is the source of the problem at the end of this movie. The other name for this was called the Mud Monster, so I mean you can figure it out. But yes, this sort of like howling and growling and moaning, it's this weird, very otherworldly noise that just like is going through the trees and around them at all times. You're just like, yeah, this is spooky.
Yeah, it's very oppressively in the soundtrack. Like you really have to like live with this thing that's like haunting them, which I think is what kind of makes it so effective.
Yeah, and they do sort of do like what I wrote down as like early Sam Raimi sort of like footage of like handheld of the
POV.
The POV of this monster sort of going through the forest, and I was like, again, pretty good. You get the sense something creepy is out there, something perhaps malevolent, something that's a little scary, and it's done this damage, and I think that was all very well done.
Yeah,
for very cheap.
And they soon hear the howling of the dog from the boat as well. So they race out to the boat to find the dog has been killed and transformed into a rather cheap children's stuffed animal in his corpse form.
Yeah, and it was something I thought they probably wouldn't do that today, even though it's clearly not the same dog. But to have the dog be killed right away is something I was like, well, it's the 70s.
I mean, it lets you know something bad's on that island.
Yeah, and it has broken the dog's neck. That's what they say.
But the monster, the mud monster, this thing we'll come to see later, it has also lifted the boat out of the dock, turned it on its side, and destroyed it. So the boat is like completely destroyed in a way that like the Hulk would have done. Yeah.
So yeah, you know that there's something creepy. There's making noises. It's violent, and it's now killed an animal. Also, it has very strong or quite amount of strength to be able to do this sort of damage to the boat.
And our heroes now are obviously quite freaked out. So Paul's asking, like, what's the deal with your brother, Marion? And she sort of talks about how, he dropped out of law school. He was always interested in the occult and magic and, like, other ways of thinking. He's, like, traveled the world learning about it. And, of course, the boatman's like, his reputation is he's the local nut.
You know what, though? I thought that was good. That is what it would be. This is a very small... it looks like a little village, and there's some weird guy who's always probably going around to the world and then coming back with weird, or seemingly weird artifacts of some sort and talking about things that are not, things the locals normally talk about. Of course, he'd be the local weirdo.
So they're just like, well, we should just, get off this island. So let's walk across the island. Let's visit the only neighbor here, Sam Parker, and see if his boat's available to take us back. And, they do a little walk, and we get to see a little of the island. And along the way, they find a hole shaped like a human figure, but like, more like a stick figure if you would like dug it in like an inch of ground.
It's funny because what we're going to learn is that this is the Mud Monster, and this is where the Mud Monster came from. Obviously, the brother was playing with these incantations and has created some sort of golem type of monster that it's backfired and it's become violent and is attacking. That's very clear from the beginning what's happening. But the amount of effort that was made to like carve the body shape of what this golem was is funny. It's like a child did it, and as you said too, it's like maybe an inch. It's like they just took the grass off. It was very funny.
Yeah, it is parody movie level, showing you it's like it just climbed out of the ground fully formed.
And it's also because it's like in that kind of like snow angel or like lens
Exactly.
It's like the arms are out, the legs are out. It just was funny.
And of course, along the way, they also find Marion's dead brother, whose head is just sticking out of the ground. I guess the mud monster at some point had buried him up to the neck in the mud. They never come back to explaining why the mud monster would do that, but it's a fun shot of just a head in the ground.
At first, I thought his head had been ripped off.
Me too.
And it was just that effect. And then what it is, for no reason, he dug a hole, put him in, and said, "But I'll leave your head off." I guess maybe as some sort of form of torture. But later on, I think there's a scene where Marion and Paul are talking, and she's like, "We should bury your brother." He's like, "There's no time." And I want to say, Paul, it's going to take 5 minutes. He's already 95% buried. It's just his head left. Just put a leaf on it.
Put some mud over top of that. You're done. Anyway, they arrive at Sam Parker's house, and they hear some gunshots in the woods, and they see that Parker's boat has also been sunk. They look out into the bay, and it's also like sunk, so there's no boats off this island. And then the neighbor, Sam Parker, stumbles out of the woods. He's mortally wounded, but before he dies, he's able to sort of whisper, it's like, "Bullets don't work. And also, your brother, he made the monster out of mud and sticks. I'm going to die now."
Okay, so Luke, you've been attacked by a monster, and you're crawling through the woods, and I find you. What's the last thing you say? What's the bit of information you're going to give me? Or do you have something like poignant to say to me?
To keep you alive.
Yeah, to keep me alive. What would you say?
I'm just going to be like, the podcast can't go on without me. End it.
I would say I'd crawl through and I'd be like, it wasn't me that pooped my pants.
It was the mud monster. It took off my pants. It pooped in them, and then it put them back on me.
Yes, please tell people. And then I die.
Anyway, what I really like about this is he climbs out of the woods. He dies. He kind of gives them the explanation for the brother made something out of mud, and it's killing everybody, and it's invulnerable, basically. And this show, it just like knows when it doesn't have time. So Paul immediately is just like, "Oh, it's a golem." He just announces to everyone, he's like, "It's a golem. I know all about them. They're soulless bodies that wander the earth. They were created from the Hebrew mythology. I know all about them. Don't worry, but I don't need to do any research. I can tell you exactly what we're facing here. It's a golem."
Yeah, and that's the scene that kind of reminded me of Spectre, which was a TV movie we watched a little while ago. They spent a lot more time in sort of like going through, finding the books, and kind of trying to build this mythology about what these monsters could be, or whatever it is, these creatures. But this one, you're right, he's just like, "It's a golem." Anyways, guys, let's keep going. But you know what I like is they never explain once why the brother did it. They're just like, he's weird and he likes trying stuff. I'm like, but why would he have? What did he think was going to happen? Like, he thought he was going to have a card player, someone to like go boating with.
Yeah, no explanation for what or why. He just did it, and now it's killing everybody.
He just did it. So he sort of got what he deserved, which is to be buried up to his neck.
I mean, that's my question, too. Did he write a letter to his sister to come see his new golem, or is it just a coincidence?
You know what's funny? I didn't think about that because clearly his hands aren't available because they're underground. So he must have said, "I've created this great thing. You should come see it." And then I guess they had a falling out. And then, but unfortunately, that time period when it took to mail the letter, because it wasn't like he didn't get buried and then write the letter.
That's true. He had to take a ship all the way back and mail it, so it was a long period of time that it was required.
Yeah, it was just it's tough living with roommates sometimes. We've all been there, you know.
At any rate, they all retreat back to the original Faber place to figure out what to do as night falls, and Paul basically is just like, "You know what, I'm gonna take some time. I'm gonna read these books, see if I can find some way to stop the golem." Everyone else is kind of just like, "We don't really believe in golems. We haven't seen one yet. We know a lot of people are dying. A lot of boats are shaking." So the boatman's like, "I think I'm going to go back to my wrecked boat and just try to call the Coast Guard."
And let me just stop you right there. What do you think of Paul as our lead? Because he's not, we've seen a lot of these kind of shows. He's not your kind of lead where he's sort of like, immediately women love him. And he's just good at things because he's a white heterosexual male, but he's also very confident. He's sort of unflappable. He's clearly a learned man. But what do you think of him as a lead? Like, do you think if this show had been picked up, he would be an engaging person to watch week to week?
I'm not sure. He's a pretty blank slate. It's not that he's unlikable or particularly likable. He's just kind of just like, you feel like, oh, I'm just like him. That's all it is. It's just like, he's just like a guy. He's just a guy, and he has almost no personality traits.
Do you think that's what it is, though? He's supposed to be just everyday Joe? He's like, it could be like you. If you almost died and saw a ghost, you'd be like this guy.
Yeah, I guess so. It's just odd. There is a little bit of like, cool job, writing sports writer, got a book going on the go about skydiving thing to it. But it has so little to do with anything that it's just kind of like, it's just information that more than it is like important.
Do you think when we watch Baffled, the Leonard Nimoy sports car psychic, let's say you put him in this movie, would it be the exact same movie? I
think it's a similar movie. Just maybe with Leonard Nimoy, you just have a little more charisma. Which is a weird. I don't think of Leonard Nimoy as a man full of charisma, but by comparing the two, I would say yes, he's full of charisma.
Anyways, I'm just it's interesting to see these sorts of things, Chris. You do see parallels when you start watching so many of these TV shows and pilots, but I think I kind of felt the same way. He didn't bother me, but I wasn't like, yes, I need to see more adventures of Paul. Yeah, I didn't mind him. It was kind of interesting because, yeah, you're right. He's not super suave. He's not this super charming guy who she immediately falls in love with. Like, that's not the case at all. He is just like an average guy just doing his best and like putting himself in harm's way, sort of, but he also just stumbling through it. Like, he came there knowing he was going to have to do some saving, but he also seems pretty much just to go with the flow. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. You're right. He does know what he's there for, but it's just like, he's like, I guess this thing will figure itself out. I've been here before, at least one other pilot time. Anyway, we'll get back to the plot where the boatman's just like, I don't buy this hooey. I'm going out. I'm going to go use my radio and call for help. And of course, he leaves to do that, immediately killed by the golem. He's just dead immediately. Yeah, and I can't remember at this point if the golem had attacked the cabin yet. Had they? Because we're going to have a few scenes. No, they still hadn't seen it. That's why he was just like, I don't believe there's a golem. I don't believe it. But I think it's probably a mistake at all times, always, right? You don't want to split up. You don't want it to go out by yourself at dark to a boat that's already been attacked once. Yeah, I mean, it's a mistake. I found this very funny because the two other characters, Mary and Paul, they're like, well, be careful when you go out there. We'll check up on you in 20 minutes or something. Like, they let him go fairly easily, even though Paul obviously knows there's a monster out there. And they're like, we'll follow up. Let's give him a chance to cool off. And of course, when he doesn't return, Paul's like, I better go check on him, just to be sure. And one of my favorite scenes of the movies is like, I'll be right back. And he opens the door to the cabin, and the golem's just standing at the door, like it's just standing in the door frame. Well, I like it was a thing where if this had a different tone, it would be like a comedy thing, right? He opens the door and it's like he's like, ooh, but it's not what they're doing. Yeah. They do a little scene. The golem sticks his arm in, so they slam the door on the golem's arm, and it gets severed. So this mud arm hits the floor, and we're all expecting it because we know what kind of movie it is. But they immediately start like touching the mud arm, being like, oh, look at this, a mud arm jumps up, it grabs Marion by the throat and's choking her, and they real rookie mistake. And they pull it off her throat, throw it across the room, and, much like you said, like very Sam Raimi, very Evil Dead, the arm gets up and then crawls away into the basement by itself. Yeah, I like that for a good chunk of this movie, the hand is the big villain. That's what they're worried about, is this mud hand. I mean, it's very funny. It definitely has an Evil Dead feel, because just like that movie, midway through, a hand is severed, and it becomes the villain for a period of time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does feel... there was parts where I was like, I wonder if Sam Raimi watched this before he made that, It was in the back of his mind, maybe. Now, with this all happened, there's trapped inside. There's an arm in the basement. They do what anyone would do. Let's stop, take a little break. Let's have some whiskey. Let's have a quick drink of whiskey. Calm down a little. It's funny. My note right at this point is it's now officially started to drag. Up to this point, it was like boom, boom, boom. And I think what it is because of the limitations that they have the cabin, they have the outside, they have the dock. That's pretty much all they can do. And they sort of need a couple beats, but they only have so much time, and they know what they need to do for the last act. So this is just like let's take a breath, everyone. But I felt it was the weakest part of the movie because of how everything, there was such a propulsion and so much momentum through this whole thing. And this little breath, I was like, just take this part out. I want to just like be on the edge of my seat the whole time. Well, they just forgot to set up a purpose, I think, is the problem. And I think if they had just been like, we have to wait till daylight and just like
at least like
Right,
shot some
right.
scary sounds, and they were like huddled up somewhere. But instead, what it is we get two scenes, I think, where they stop and like pour themselves a drink and just kind of like chill out and have a glass of whiskey and just chat about, you know, their lives and what's going on in them. It's a real low key thing where also it's just like the 70s. So like, you got to stop. You got to get a little drunk. Just have a, you know, in the middle of a crisis.
It is funny though, because it's like they do that moment and then boom, it's just at the door shaking the handle again, trying to get in. And it is literally like, let's just have a drink and then get back to exactly where we were 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, and that's what it is they are hearing the rustling of the arm in the basement, and Paul's just like, well, I better go check on that arm downstairs. Great. He starts walking down the stairs into the basement. Classic horror movie, like step down one step, step down one, another step. And then the severed arm's just waiting on the staircase, grabs him by the ankle, and just like he trips and tumbles all the way down the stairs, and then the severed arm's on his throat immediately.
Yeah, and so it's a lot of scenes of it like kind of choking him. And I thought it actually looked pretty good. Like it leaves mud on him. He's able to like wrestle this hand as he should. He's got two, and he throws it onto the ground, and it suddenly just like burst into flames. And he's just as surprised as the audience is. It's like, what just happened? And then he does something that makes me laugh in TV, which is something I don't think you should do in most life, which is the hand is lit on fire, and then he puts his finger down and goes, what is it on? And puts his finger in it and then licks it to see what it was. He's like, he said something. He's like, salt, ordinary table salt, which is fine. You go, oh, this is its weakness. But like, you don't know what it was. What if it was rat poison?
I mean, to be fair, while he was wrestling with the arm, he knocked over a shelf of preserves. And
Fair.
What he sees on the ground, why he needed to taste it doesn't make sense, because it's literally a giant bag that says salt on the side, spilled out everywhere, that he's like looking at him. He's like, I know what it is, Paul. I can read.
Yeah, so he's determined from this that salt is the its weakness. And I think later on he's like, I think what's her name, Marianne?
Marion.
She asks him, she's like, why salt? He's like, salt's like for your, like the soul. And they just like move on. I was like, sorry, what was that?
Yes, he gives a very clear explanation. He comes
What does he
upstairs,
say?
like, salt kills it, and he says that in some religions and in cult rituals, salt represents the soul. You know, like how Lot's wife became a pillar of salt.
Those two things don't connect, but sure. But what I like though is they're consistent. They give as much effort into that as they did into how the golem is made. They're just like, it's a mudman.
Yeah.
And then they're like, salt's got soul.
Well, it is a
I'm like,
body
sure.
without a soul, so I guess giving it salt, which is a soul, causes it to explode.
Yeah, or I'd give it some sort of other sort of sentience. But anyways, so he's like, with the next kind of scene while he's telling this, he's taking the big bag of salt and he's pouring it around the doorways. And I'm assuming he puts it on some other places like windows and stuff. We don't see that, but I'm guessing the entrances to the house, he's trying to ward it off.
Yeah, he shores them up. They have another glass of whiskey. They have a little break. And then Paul's like, you know what? I better go check on the boatman again.
Yeah, and he goes to he goes to check on the boat. And now there was a part I didn't understand. Really quick, he's going to go look, and he sees that there's big bags of salt that are under the water. I'm assuming.
No.
See, here's what I knew. I knew it was salt water. I assumed that those were also bags of salt because the original guy, who's now dead and was a ghost, was trying to transport salt to another place to stop this guy. Is that what that was?
No, you must have blinked and missed it. He goes out to check on the radio, and he finds the dead boatman. He uses the radio, immediately gets the Coast Guard on the radio. They're like, we're on our way. Just stay alive for a little bit. And Marion inside the house immediately gets menaced by the mudman. So she's supposed to, she needs to run. She escapes. She also runs down to the boathouse. And as she gets into the boathouse, Paul is getting out, and he has brought those bags with salt with him as protection. And he immediately just fumbles them and drops them in the lake.
Oh, see, I did miss that part. I see. Okay.
So they just do a shot. It's like, oops, we dropped the salt in the water. Lake, it's the ocean. I'm sorry. He drops them in the ocean, and he's just like, we lost our only weapon.
Right. Which is like, no, you didn't. You're on the ocean. It's full of salt. Come on, Paul.
Well, that's it. Paul immediately comes up with a plan. He's just like, I've got this rope. Let's run into the woods. I'm going to make a little trip line along the coast, and I'm going to lure the golem toward us, which is exactly what he does. And the golem chases him over, trips over the rope, falls into the ocean, and it immediately bursts into flames, and then just like it looks like it suffers greatly because it just burns in that ocean for so long. It's just like so on fire, still alive, still flailing around.
It is funny. Whatever the effect they had done to light something on fire in the water goes on way longer than you think. And they're clearly like, just keep rolling. Just keep rolling on this thing. Because it's like, it goes at least a couple beats longer than you think. And I'm like, oh, I actually feel bad for this soulless creature.
Yeah, it looks painful. It does look painful. And then, of course, as it sinks into the water, Paul quips, "And I used to think the ocean was too salty."
I know. I don't know. It's just a funny thing. I'm like, wow, you sound like a fun person to play on vacation with there, Paul.
It was just very funny. They're like, we need a cool wisecrack. But that wisecrack is like, the ocean's too salty for me.
What's a better line? He could have been like, could have used pepper too. Is that better?
That's pretty good. Like
All
he
right.
wants to eat the mudman.
That's right.
Anyway, we cut to the shore. They've already got back from the island. They're back on the mainland. A Coast Guard is with them, clearly has picked them up from there. And this Coast Guard, no questions, believes everything that happened, understands the golem is real, that it killed several people, and he's just like, thanks for telling me, good information to know. And then the Coast Guard's like, hey, what about this one massive plot hole in this entire movie? And I was just like, I hadn't thought about this plot hole, but this Coast Guard just is just like, hey, I noticed a big plot hole in the story you just told me.
Yeah. Well, they go, what are we gonna, how are you gonna like file your report? And he's like, I'm just gonna file it as persons or persons unknown. I was like, okay, case closed.
No, that's not the plot hole I'm talking about. Is the Coast Guard? He's like, I believe everything you said. It all makes sense. And then the Coast Guard says, but I don't really understand how the golem got into the water to wreck all those boats. Because if it was going to burst into flames, and I'm like, he's right. The golem couldn't have wrecked all those boats.
Oh, I didn't even hear that. I thought that all he had said was that like they're just waving it away. But I don't know. Maybe it wore boots.
No, well, that's the thing. He's just like, he points it out. A thing I hadn't thought about at all. He's just like, how did it get into the water to destroy all the boats if it was allergic to like salt water? And then Paul's just like, I don't know. I guess it was careful or something. I was just like, what is this? Why are you pointing this out to me?
I have to rewatch that. I don't even remember that.
I mean, and if you think about it, sure, in the boathouse, maybe it could have sunk those too. But when they get to the neighbor's house, his boat is in the middle of a bay, sunk to the bottom. Like, there's no way the golem got to it.
Well, here's what he can use. He can probably use a shovel because he buried the one guy. So maybe he can also like use a gun or something. Maybe he like, I don't know, he torched it somehow.
Yeah, it was just very funny. I'm just like, why is this Coast Guard pointing out this thing that I probably shouldn't have been pointed out to the audience?
Yeah, and then Marion's like, hey, maybe we should meet up sometime. And he gets all funny. He's like, yeah, maybe. And she's like, well, where are you going to be? He's like, I'm in lots of places, okay?
I mean, I think it was a little sweeter than that. Like, they're like, let's get together when we're in New York. We'll go on a date. We had a nice time. And Paul, my reading was Paul was into it, and he's just like, but you know, I might be away on ghost business. I never know when a ghost is going to come along.
Yeah, and that's it. And that's the whole movie.
Yeah, it's a setup for more to come.
Yeah. Which unfortunately there wasn't, but we will have to watch the prequel to see if it gives us a little more backstory with this world.
I mean, if you can find it, we'll watch it. But I could not find it. I could not find a video of it anywhere.
Yeah, maybe it's gone.
Gone to the ages. Well, Jordan, any final thoughts, or you want to just get into writings?
I mean, I just want to say, like, I think for a low budget movie, I think this was pretty competently acted. It was pretty competently directed. Everything was effective in this kind of sense of dread coming. I mean, the ending was a little bit anticlimactic because I think they couldn't really show the mud monster too much because they knew it wasn't going to look so great. But it was like, it doesn't outstay its welcome. That's for sure. Like, I wasn't bored at all during this, and I was pretty invested in what was going to happen. So, like, I think it's pretty good. So I'm going to give it a pretty decent score.
What's that score?
I'm wavering with, like, I kind of want to say 7.5 because I think it's not quite there. But, like, I don't know. I almost want to go with an 8 because it was just like I really kind of enjoyed how just straightforward this was.
So what is it? What is it going to be?
Okay, I'm gonna give it an 8.
Can it go ahead? Give it an 8. Wow.
Yeah.
A real
Yeah.
swing. I don't think you're wrong. It's fine. It's fine. I think the howling is kind of the most effective part. There's some cute scenes. I think it ultimately though it's anemic. It just has not much going on, and it's kind of
I would agree with that.
this and then this and then this. I mean, I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I'm going to go just a 6. I think it's a 5, but I'm going to bump it up because I do think there is some tension due to some of the crazy score or sound design they did. So I'm going to go 6.
Yeah. Yeah, my 8's just it was an 8 of enjoyment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was just this thing, it doesn't get bogged down at all. And it's I don't disagree with you at all. Anemic is a good way to say it because they really have one move, which is the thing's going to shake the doorknob. That's pretty much it. But as you also said, the moaning and the sort of wailing and that slight ratcheting really makes a huge difference. And I can only imagine what this would be like if that wasn't in it. Can you imagine just looking at a poster, you're like, this is terrible. This is just people walking around.
Yeah, it would have been so quiet and so weird before the score went in, or the sound design. Yeah, it's interesting. It's one of the first times I can think of watching something for this podcast and being like, well, this movie had $4,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is so low budget. It's kind of there's a few small set pieces like the destroyed boats that look like they were probably a little more expensive to do. But even the Mudman doesn't look like he was very expensive to make it. It feels like watching a very low budget film.
Yeah. It's almost not really like a grindhouse movie because it doesn't really have that tone, but it does have that we're going to do as much as we can with very little. And again, is it great? No, but I think it's very effective for what they're trying to do, which is people in a cabin running around the woods a little bit, and they just don't get bogged down with trying to explain anything, which I think for a movie that's as fast as this is, and I should say pilot, and for as simple as this is, I think they just played to their strengths.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, considering CBS apparently threw no money at a pilot they were trying to make.
Yeah. Well, that is weird. Why is it so low budget for a second kick? Do you think the first one had a lot of money and they're like, we'll let you do it one more time, but for a 10th of the budget?
I don't know. It's just so odd, too, because I'm just why are you doing this, Steve? You're giving them none of the tools to succeed. They're still doing way better than they should with it. And also you're like, we still don't want it.
Yeah.
Why did you say yes to begin with?
And what do you think, though? World Beyond or The Mudman? The working title. What do you like better?
World Beyond's a great title. It would have been a good series title.
Yeah, I agree.
I actually think it's better than World of Darkness, which was the original pilot. I think that's a better title. The World Beyond is very good.
Yeah, The World Beyond.
Which I think, because I had to find more information, I was Googling it. I think World Beyond is maybe one of the Walking Dead spin-offs, maybe, because, it's a good title.
Yeah, I saw that too, because every time I was Googling, I'm like, no, I don't want to see that stupid thing. I want Mudman.
Well, Jordan, that about wraps up for this episode. So it's time to get into some of our other business, the bonus episodes for charity, which we talk about these days. It's some of these series we watch, we either take the escape pod, don't get to watch all the episodes, or we're doing a best of, so we're only watching the top 3 episodes of each season, which leaves a lot of episodes of the series you don't watch. And sometimes listeners are like, hey, I would have liked to hear your thoughts on one of those episodes you missed. So we sort of put this initiative together, bonus episodes for charity. We've got a list of charities on our website as selected by past guests. You can find them all at continuumdrag.podbean.com, or on social media you can follow the links there in our bios. And you can do a donation to charity, and we'll go back, we'll watch one of the episodes of your choosing, and we'll do a little bonus episode for you. You can get all the information about that on the website, as I said, continuumdrag.podbean.com, or email us at continuumdrag, or continuumdrag@gmail.com. There we go. And we can give you more details on that. But that's the idea. You do a little donation to charity, and we'll go back and do a bonus episode that we'll release on the feed for you. And on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, we're going to put some clips from old World Beyond. See a mudman, see a mud arm. You see those things.
Yeah. Maybe that little scene of the clearly puppet dog.
Yeah, I'll see if I want to put a dog corpse up online. We'll find out.
You know what it reminded me of? Remember we watched that weird Western show where they ended up being witches?
Yeah, Black Noon.
Remember they showed a dead bird or something in it? It looked as good as it did in that movie.
Well, you can find all these clips at Continuum Drag's the handle on our social media, so you can find those there. But that about wraps it up. So, listener, thank you for joining us. And Jordan, I will see you next week.
See you then.
Continuum Drag is recorded in Toronto, Ontario, and Seoul, South Korea. Theme music by James Rick Seidler. Produced by Jordan Delick and Luke Black. Special thanks to Aaron Yunes.